In the pantheon of Doctor Who stories, one has stood out for quite some time. Originally released in 1980 as a comic in the pages of Doctor Who magazine, The Star Beast was remade as an audio adventure starring Tom Baker back in 2019. It's now the first of the 60th anniversary specials, with the welcome return of both David Tennant and Catherine Tate back in their original roles, although our Doctor is now number 14 instead of number 10, and a considerable amount of time has passed for Donna Noble. Today, I take a look at this new adaptation of a classic story as we go beyond the sofa. I wanted this video to be a little different from the videos that I've done before. This is very much a reaction to something that I've not really sat down and had much time to digest. So these comments are likely to be a lot more raw than the in-depth videos that I've done in my New Who rewatch, for example. I will get to that sort of review for The Star Beast eventually. But before we start, I should say that this will probably contain a lot of spoilers, not just for the TV show, but for the comic and the audio production as well. But for now, let's dive in to the first of the 60th anniversary specials. What we get here isn't a direct translation from the comic book. It's a very competent writer who's taken the original premise of the comic and adapted it whilst adding in new story elements to fit with the 60th year. Because of that, there are several problems with the adaptation. However, these are mostly understandable. I couldn't take a look at this episode without also commenting on everything that's new about this series. We start off with the title sequence, which a lot of people have been very interested to see. My first reaction on seeing it was that it was very pink. And to me, this is interesting because it seems to follow a current design trend, which is using pinks and lighter purples, sometimes offset with oranges. We actually see this design in the title sequence itself. Honestly, I think it looks really nice, and I love the fact that we don't just see a vortex, but we actually get the TARDIS moving through that vortex, and we cut away to various shots of the ship. Perhaps my favourite part here is where we see the base of the TARDIS skidding through the universe. The titles look outstanding. Maybe the only downside to them is the reveal of the logo, which doesn't seem to quite fit. It doesn't seem to sit within the mix properly. But that's a very small nitpick on what is otherwise a very nice piece of work. What is perhaps a little bit disappointing is the start of this episode is actually pure exposition. And I was hoping that we'd get away from that sort of storytelling, but I can kind of see why, in this instance at least, those elements were put in place. The episode is set up so that people new to Doctor Who can at least have some idea about what's going on. This was always going to be difficult, especially when you're bringing back an old Doctor's face and an old Doctor's companion who left the series after a particularly in-depth storyline. So these elements at the start of the episode are somewhat redundant for those of us who are fans, but I'm not sure that they'd fully bring somebody up to speed if they're brand new to the show. However, I can see why they were put in there. After this, we really get into the meat of the story. The Doctor lands on Earth and almost instantly runs into Donna Noble, a woman who will die if she remembers who he is. At almost the same moment, an alien spacecraft is crashing in the distance, and the audience is left wondering whether these events are in some way connected. And it's here we start to see some of the major changes that have been made to the comic. The character of Fudge is all but written out, so that there can be more of an emphasis on Donna and her family and her daughter Rose, who becomes a pivotal character in the narrative. I really like the way that Rose was introduced, actually. I liked that we see some of her challenges, that she has that, but she's also got a very loving and supporting family as well. This is Russell T Davies doing what Russell T Davies does best, heavy on the character development, but in a way that really breezes along when you're watching the episode. Some people have commented on the deadnaming of the character. To them, I would say this: if you're going to have any form of representation in any form of media, bad things have got to happen to that character. It's more real if those bad things mirror things that would actually happen in real life. Yes, it's uncomfortable to watch. But as Russell T Davies explains, it also helps people who might have acted like that see a very human face behind their actions and see the actual pain that it can cause. And it's only when we experience these things for ourselves, and story is one of the ways which we experience the world, that we can find a true empathy with that character. And I hope one day we're going to live in a world where we don't need to tell these sorts of stories anymore. Unfortunately, we're just not there yet. It's a shame that we lose Fudge, and perhaps it would have been nice to see Rose having some sort of relationship with somebody her own age, as well as the support that she gets from her family. Instead, Fudge is just a young boy who lives on the same street. It's kind of disappointing because that character was a lot of fun in the original, but it is understandable. Rose then comes across the Meep, and this is where we see something particularly special. The practical and visual effects in this episode are top-notch, and the way that they've realised the Meep is excellent. If this is the sort of thing that we're going to be seeing going forward, then we're in for a real treat over the next few seasons. It's also worth talking about the lighting. In Russell T Davies's original run, I did think that the lighting design was a little on the nose. We're in an alien spaceship, so they make the lighting green. Well, even in the early 2000s, lighting design for television was moving on leaps and bounds, and for a while it didn't look like Doctor Who was keeping up. This new series, however, goes beyond what we've seen before. It's bright, it's vibrant, but the lighting effects are more subtle, and it looks really stunning, to be honest. And we should have expected this, after seeing Bad Wolf's adaptation of A Discovery of Witches, a series that had impeccable production and lighting design. From what we've seen, the production design really is top-notch here too. Everything from unit to the new TARDIS interior, it really jumps off the screen. Couple that with the sorts of effects that you'd see in a Disney Marvel property, and I think we're probably at the best-looking season of Doctor Who since it came back in 2005. But there are some issues with the script. To fit in the new Noble family storyline, a lot of really interesting and fun moments were lost from the original comic. We don't see the Doctor being kidnapped, or having a bomb planted inside of him. We don't see the Meep homeworld or the steel factory workers infected with black sun radiation. Or black sun radiation, which has been changed completely to psychedelic sun radiation instead. And to be fair, I don't mind that change as much, as it's probably made the visuals a lot more appealing. We don't see the Meep acting quite as badly as we do in the comics. We miss Rose getting kidnapped by the Meep, although that would originally have been the character of Sharon. And we don't get to see as much of the Wraith warriors as I probably would have liked. And there's only ever danger to about 5 miles of the country, to London. In the original story, the whole of Yorkshire was at stake. Let's go back to those warriors for a moment, to explore where some of this falls down a little. Now, does anybody who's completely new to this story get that the Wraith warriors are a kind of intergalactic police force? Because I knew that, and I was still a little unsure if that's what they were going with in this adaptation. But perhaps a comparison like that is a little bit unfair. The Star Beast we see on screen is a different beast to the one that's in the comics, and there are a lot of things that it does right as well. I loved the inclusion of UNIT, and I love that they now look like the paramilitary organisation that they were always meant to be. Shirley Ann Bingham, played by Ruth Madeley, is excellent, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of that character down the line. There's a wonderful conversation between her and the Doctor early into the episode, and I just feel that there's a smart character there ready for some development. There were some lovely comedic moments as well. The Doctor telling the psychic paper to catch up. Donna and the tea. You know, I don't think I've actually laughed out loud at a Doctor Who episode for years, and it was a lovely thing to experience again.
Oh, for the love of God, none of this is real!
Hey, Dad's home.
For the most part, I liked what they did with Rose and Donna and their family dynamic. I thought the Meep was such a fantastic design, but also wonderfully portrayed by Miriam Margolyes, and the story bounced along at a very fast pace. If anything, the last half of the story is incredibly fast, and it doesn't give you much time to pause and collect yourself. Some people will enjoy that, others may find it a bit too much, but I really liked it. And please, don't think that my criticisms of the show mean that I didn't like the episode. That's far from the truth. I actually really enjoyed the episode. I just think that we see some of the failings here that the last few years of the show had in them as well. And I just kind of expected a bit more from Russell T Davies. The exposition dumps are a little less bombastic than some of the ones that we see in Chris Chibnall's era, mostly due to them having a little bit of a better balance within the action. But they are still there. Now, you need some exposition in a script, but I think that adding the section at the beginning made the start of that episode far too exposition heavy. It almost wasn't needed, as we do have the moment where the Doctor meets number 56 and explains the problem of running into Donna, but I get that the moment was there to try and bring new viewers up to speed. Of some concern was the sonic screwdriver. I didn't mind it drawing a screen in the air at the beginning of the show, but the force fields were a bit much, and there's always this problem with the Sonic that instead of it being a useful tool that helps out in the odd situation, it becomes a magic wand that can get the Doctor out of anything. Using the Sonic should be the last choice for any writer, and I don't even think that it should be featured in some episodes. Moving into the next 60 years, the show really needs to get smarter with how the Doctor escapes, because otherwise, it's just going to get less interesting. There was also one section at the end where I think the good elements of the episode were undone and let down. Until then, we've seen a very smart portrayal of a trans woman, one that's endearing and engaging. We have an explanation for how Donna was able to survive the meta-crisis because some of the energy was transferred to her daughter. And then we have this.
It's a shame you're not a woman anymore, because she'd have understood.
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
Russell, my darling Russell, I really like your writing, but I think this was a massive misstep. Not only have you just talked about how the Doctor is essentially non-binary themselves, but you have a go at him for the way that he presents itself. It should not have to be said that you don't do good representation by putting other people down. You do it by lifting everybody up. This was an explanation that was completely unnecessary to the plot, and somewhat gratuitous considering the themes of the story. Even coming from a character like Donna, who is brash and often crass, it feels wrong.
But
I gave away all my money. And do you know why, Doctor? I gave it away to be like you. So I could be kind, so I could be nice, so I could be helpful.
Because Donna might be a lot of things, but she's not cruel. And this bit, it actually mirrors what the children on the bikes were doing to Rose earlier in the episode by saying, your identity is this, and so somehow you are lesser. Please don't let that be the message that people take away from Doctor Who. You know, I think this was a massive misstep in what was otherwise a really well-crafted journey for Rose, for Donna, and the Doctor. But I don't want to leave this on a sour note, so I'll end that by saying just this. All the audience really needed at that point was a short explanation that now the energy was split, it was allowed to dissipate harmlessly. You'd have avoided that last bit of exposition, and you wouldn't have this really awkward moment at a time that should have been filled with triumph. Because ultimately, triumph is something that this episode does have, despite it being a little bit Deus Ex Machina. I love the explanation of how Donna survives the meta-crisis. I adore the way that Rose, being influenced by the meta-crisis energy, is foreshadowed by the Meep playing with her toys. I love the toys, and the TARDIS door being painted on the shed. It's a wonderful reveal that is set up expertly in the first part of the story. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like Doctor Who was back. Yes, it's got its problems, many of them akin to those in the Chris Chibnall era. But it has fewer problems, and many of the issues are tempered by the rest of the script. It's fast-paced, it's fun, it's funny, and it revels in everything that makes the show great. Not only is it a good start to the specials, but it's left me wanting more and excited to see where the TARDIS is going to land next week. That's what I think, anyway. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, thank you ever so much for joining me beyond the sofa.